Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zervis. I'm the Technical Evangelist at CTC Software, and today, in collaboration with APAL there in Australia, we're bringing you a presentation on the BIM Data Suite here. I want to go over a comprehensive introduction about this suite and let you know as much as I possibly can about what this suite can do for you. This particular suite is really built around the whole concept of big data, or I guess medium data, if you're only using it in the collaboration of a Revit project model. But if you decide to expand beyond just Revit and you want to marry this information up with other systems, this could truly become BIM data. And the purpose of this suite is to make it very easy to extract data about your project to a Microsoft SQL Server that you own, whether it's Azure SQL Server or you want to put it to SQL Server up in the the AWS cloud, or on your own system, whatever. You can set it up wherever you want, and you can have this Microsoft SQL Server hold all of the information about your project that you tell it to hold. It could also work with JSON files or XML files, depending on what kind of data types you need with this extraction. So you can marry it up with all kinds of other systems. Now, once you extract this data, you can leverage this with Power BI type visualizations, or it could be Tableau visualizations, or name your BI tool of choice. Or you can, again, like I mentioned, marry this to, say, facilities management, or building automation systems, or you name it. There's a lot of different ways this information can be married up with other systems. I'm going to show you a little bit about that today. We're going to go through how to get the data, what that looks like. We're going to take a look at a couple of popular reports. I'm going to talk a little about the tools and a little bit about the install of this suite. And I'm going to talk also about how you can get your hands on this suite if you're really interested in it. And since I'm not big on death by PowerPoint, we're going to jump in and kind of take a look at this stuff live right away here. As always, just so you know, CTC webinars are always recorded. And so if you want to come back and review this information later, share this with other team members or other coworkers you've got, by all means, this will be recorded and put up to our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to take a look at this. Okay. I want to show this stuff as real time as I possibly can, and so I'm starting with a blank slate, and I'll explain exactly what the tools are in a minute here. But one of the things that I want to show you is one of my folders on my desktop or on my computer. It's called the PAL-Q folder. PAL stands for Project Activity Logger, and this is one part of the BIM Data Suite. Now, I point this folder out. I'm going to leave this on screen throughout today's discussion so you can see what happens with this folder, and I'm also going to jump now into Revit. I'm going to open up a Revit project model because the most interesting stuff really happens when Revit is open, and that's kind of why we're tracking this stuff. Now, in explanation of that folder that's kind of in the background here, and you'll see files manifest here in a minute, that PAL, that Project Activity Logger, is one of the two major parts, well, one of the three major parts of the BIM Data Suite. It sits in the background. End users, once this is installed, don't have to do anything at all. They don't have to click a button to make something extract. They don't have to do any special tasks. They just work in Revit like normal. So I'm going to go here and open up a project. I happen to be using Revit 2018 today, but this works in Revit 2017 through Revit 2021. I'm going to go grab my architectural 2018 project, create a new local, go ahead and open up all work sets, overwrite my existing file, all the things that you typically would do when you're opening up a Revit project model. While this thing opens, and once it opens, it's going to trigger that Project Activity Logger from the BIM Data Suite in the background to start logging data to that folder and also writing it to my SQL Server. So it does that all right away, all at the same time. Give this thing a second here. It's opening up my project like it normally will. And you can start seeing here now, all of a sudden, there's files that manifest back here. As an end user, I'm not doing anything about this. I'm just working in Revit, navigating around, doing what I got to do. And these files are going to show up. And if you keep an eye on these files, they'll disappear over time as well. because they're going to get logged, they're going to get processed through the project activity logger to the SQL Server. And right now, it is on my computer, 9:05 p.m. on Tuesday. That doesn't really mean a whole lot to many of you because you're not in Minnesota in the USA like I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh this here, and we're going to see, yeah, 2:06 a.m. Wednesday, September 23rd in UTC time, which is how this information is going to manifest in my database. So just kind of keep this in mind, 2:06 a.m. Right now, UTC. We'll come back to that in a minute. You can actually see some of those files are disappearing right now because they're getting logged directly to that project activity portion of my SQL database. Now, the rest of this suite here, the BIM Data Suite, sits right here. There's actually only one button. People go, oh, only one button, Sean, that's not a whole lot of stuff. Well, again, there's two major parts that are in Revit, and there's a couple of other working parts elsewhere. But you saw the PAL kind of doing some of its work over here, running in the background just invisibly. I don't have to do anything about it. The other major tool here is the project snapshot exporter. This is the part where I can dig real deep into my Revit project database and pull information out of it. So I can go here in the project snapshot exporter. I can choose exactly what it is I want to go after. I can choose what categories of data it is that I want. I can choose what kinds of data out of those categories, right on down to the actual parameters themselves. I have my current setup here configured for what I like for a health check. It's our default health check settings that come along with the project snapshot exporter. I mean, certainly if I wanted every single parameter and every single value ever in my model that's possible to gain from the API, I could tell it to grab everything. The thing is, for this model, it'll take a lot longer for me to capture that data if I capture everything when I don't really need everything. You see, there's a lot of times in our families where, like my doors, for example, on my architectural doors, I have a parameter that's called control_swing angle, CTRL_swing angle, and it's grouped in other, and it's an instance parameter, and it's all formula driven, and it does some logics to make sure my door doesn't break. Do I really need to capture that and all of the other control parameters that I use to make sure my families don't break that I usually hide from users? I really don't think so. I care about capturing major pieces of data. And so I choose usually to not go after everything, every single possible parameter. What I like is to leverage these defaults that go after specific key values that I like to know about so I can determine whether or not my project is healthy or not. Now, if I was using this for the purpose of facilities management or building automation controls, I would probably choose different parameters. But again, I'm going to choose the parameters that I care about, and that's going to be it. And that way, it just makes my snapshot a lot faster. I can capture this entire model and save it to SQL and get the data that I want in about 4 minutes, give or take. In fact, for the fun of it, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to use those typical filters that I like using. I'm going to tell this to go to my SQL Server, which in my case today happens to be on my local laptop for convenience. I tend to travel around a lot, and this helps me with the ability to do demonstrations like this on the road. But I'm going to go ahead and test my connection, just make sure that it's got a successful connection to my server, and then I'm going to go ahead and tell it to begin. Now, while this is doing its work, nothing's actually going to be happening here with PAL. This isn't one of the things we track. But what I do want is to pull forward some of those reports that you might be interested in, so you can kind of see what the BIM Data Suite ultimately can achieve for you. Again, all of this is going into SQL Server, and it's really not extraordinarily interesting for most people to look at databases and tables of information. What usually is more interesting is if we take a look at a report that gives us some information about our model. In fact, let me refresh this to get the absolute latest and greatest pieces of data here into this report. When I run this refresh, it's going to look out and grab all of the upcoming information. Some of the things that I really like is largest models that I've been working in this case, largest models in megabytes, or the top projects, the top 10 or however many projects by how much time has been spent in Revit models in those projects, and maybe even like the top users who have been contributing to those models. Since this is my own local data set, I'm the one who's contributed the most here, but I can see that. And I can see the overall corporate syncs to central times. So I can start seeing like, oh yeah, well, let's go find a time that actually was there. Here we go. There's a couple. So like on 7/17/2020, this year, there was a sync to central from the model that I'm actually in right now that took 2 seconds, give or take. And if I want to take a look over here at some things like opening times, I can understand that in this case on 4/12/2019, one of the models in my company, in fact, it's also the same model, took 131 seconds to open. I have mine tuned for seconds in this case. But this helps me kind of understand sort of the corporate average, the corporate max of open and save times. I can understand this information real quick. Now, if I want to start drilling into a specific project, I can do that. If I wanted to say filter this time down to a specific time range, maybe I only care about stuff this year. I can start having this thing only show me information about this active year. That's meaningful because now I can understand more about like what this data means from a specific point in time. Now I can also dig into my project summary data. Part of the BIM Data Suite, I have a tool that's called the BIM Data Admin. It's a simple tool that just allows me to define what I call a logical project. See, not every single model matters to me. I don't care about, Joe's model that they're making on their desktop for their house. So I'm not going to group that into a logical project I care about. But I may very well take the critical projects or my current projects in my company, and I'm going to create a project for them. And when I do that, this will give me some information about that. It tells me here that this is the CTC headquarters project. There's 10 days until the next issuance of this project coming up. The issue date is listed here as 10/2. It's currently had X number of hours. There's 13 models a part of this, and there's 2 users who've been working on these models. And I can see exactly who those users are. I can see how much time they've been investing in specific models. And I can see how many items they've been editing while they've been in those models over the life cycle since whatever time this is. Now, if I wanted to shorten this up a bit, maybe I want to care only about stuff edited since last September, so 1 year's time frame. There's been 1,300 items edited in a year, right? Obviously, I don't do a lot of work in this project model, but I can really start to rapidly filter this down. I can see who the top contributors are, just kind of percentage-wise by amount of time they've spent, or in this case, how many items they've edited overall. I can see who's been active in this model. I can also start to understand things like the file sizes and how much time has been spent in each model, just kind of in another way, right? There's all different ways of viewing your data. This is all just byproduct information from the stuff that's being logged passively. I don't have to do anything as a BIM manager to go after this info. As users are opening and saving their models, it's served to me on a silver platter, right? As a BIM manager, I also like knowing this kind of information. So for my project and for this particular model in my project, I like noting things like last sync to central time, last load time, how many warnings are there, do I have to care about them, sort of a breakdown of the warnings real quick, and I can dig into more of that later if I care to. I can understand stuff like the basic properties, how many work sets, how many phases, how many design options, if at all, how many views are in there. Are there any in-place families, right? Are there unplaced families? This means I can purge things out. I can understand just real quick at a glance some of the basic quick numbers about that project right now. And I can also see down here sort of a quick breakdown of views. I can see some basic information about links, CAD links, Revit links, things like that, just so I can kind of see generally the health of the model. And then here, if I wanted to dig in very specifically to this project and this specific file on this project, I can see sort of that same stuff that I saw on the cover page, but dedicated to this particular model. Like over time, what's its sync to central times been? Earlier today, I did a sync to central, and let's see, what was that? That was at one, this is the, yeah, save to central, 1.77 seconds. Wasn't a whole lot of things changed, apparently. And I can see that at the UTC time of 2:04, we looked at that earlier, 2:04 a.m. UTC, this thing took 32.3 seconds to open. Well within my normal tolerable range, right? 32 seconds, 33 seconds, no big deal. But I can kind of see, like, there was a couple of times when there was some anomalies out here when this model maybe took a little bit longer to open, took almost 4 minutes to open this model. And maybe I care who that was and what machine they were on. I could find that kind of information out. Now, this was a ways ago. This was back in 2018, so I really don't care about that one. But like, you can understand this information. I can understand how the file size has changed over time. I can see how it's grown, how it's shrunk. Has anybody been doing major purges? There was obviously some major stuff that happened here. It was about 50 meg, and then it dropped drastically in file size, and then it increased in file size. Someone did some more maintenance. I can see what's going on here. And this is meaningful to me as a BIM manager. If I'm seeing a file size get out of control, and the open and save times rapidly increasing, this data, again, just served up to me, man, this can save me so much time. Similarly, my warnings down here. You know, if I'm getting close to a deadline and I'm seeing my warnings just skyrocket, well, maybe I got to get in there and do something. Maybe users are doing some crazy things, exploding DWGs that they shouldn't be exploding, and doing weird stuff where they're copying stuff all over the place, maybe inappropriately. Now, there's a view that I really like here as well, and I like this because it helps me very carefully understand exactly what's going on in these projects. Now, this is filtered down. Actually, let me go to the far right over here. Right, I can grab this model. The elevation of this dot is basically how long the save to central took. The size of the dot is how long it took to open the file. I can see who it was, but when I click on these dots, this is the really slick part here. When I click on these dots, I get information about the computers themselves. I can know exactly what workstation the end user was on. I can know how much RAM they've got, what their video card is, the IP address of that computer if I care to, so I can see if somebody's maybe attached wirelessly to my network or not. Right, so understanding this kind of information, this is super key for me to be able to dig in and be like, oh yeah, there's problems here and there and everywhere, right? So I can understand this kind of stuff real quickly. All right, and I kind of get that breakdown of stuff over here again as well. Now, I was mentioning about warnings. You can break down the warnings in these models and see really quickly what the warnings are and what they affect. You can see a breakdown of the views in the model and who the user was that was last working in that view and how much time they've been spending there, right? So I can see total hours broken down by effort of views themselves. This might be meaningful to understand, like, where do people spend their time? You might notice that I spend the vast majority of my time on the exit view because I do a lot of talking and not a lot of working in the project. But you can kind of find that out, right? That's kind of meaningful. Some people like to know where specific users are spending their time. Hey, where does Sean spend his time? Or where's Kyle doing his work? And I can find out exactly what models they're working on and how much time they've been investing in those models specifically. So if you've got a new person in the company and you kind of want to see where they're being assigned, maybe you've got a user in the company who sometimes is a bit problematic, you can figure out where they're working and what models you may have to give some more love to, right? Because this will help you isolate that stuff. There's also things like breakdowns by projects, by Revit versions. I can see what Revit versions are installed where. I can see Revit versions by project. So by project and model, I can understand exactly what Revit versions were at play there, which can be really helpful for running down issues, why things might be crashing. Sometimes there's just a mismatch of Revit builds, and I can find that kind of stuff out real fast, right? So there's all different ways of viewing this information, and this is all stuff that's super low effort. You get the project activity logger installed on all users' computers, you get it logging to the actual SQL Server, and this is just a byproduct of users opening and saving models like they would day in, day out. You're basically done for that. Now let's go take a look at the other part of this here. Okay, so I was taking a snapshot. This is that deeper dive into my model here. And it's actually already successfully written this. It went through the little 79 points of things that it was doing, its connections. It kind of gave me that fact that everything was successful, nothing failed. That's what I like to see here. And I'm basically done with this. I'm moving on with my project. And we're going to dig into that in a minute here. But one thing I also wanted to point out is that you can schedule this. So if you wanted these snapshots to be taken for specific models, at specific points in time, maybe I've got some critical projects, and every Friday at 6 p.m., Australian time, I want to take a snapshot of the model, right, of a collection of models. This can headlessly open up those models. It uses your instance of Revit, but it can open up those models in their proper version of Revit and take a snapshot just like I had here, and then close those models without saving, so that you can move on. You don't have to even be sitting at your desk and waiting for this to happen. It can do this over the weekend when you're not in the office. As long as your computer's powered on, it can do the work, right? But let's go take a look at what that snapshot report looks like. I have a separate report that I have set up to look at that part of my database here. Let me pull this forward real quick. So this is the Sean Zerbis Health Check report. This is how I like viewing my data. And this report also comes along for the ride. Certainly, if you want to make it prettier, you can go ahead and modify it to do that. But this just gives me some real quick information. So I just took a snapshot of this project right here. And specifically, that was right here. This is my local time in this case. I have this tuned to actually offset my time. So actually, no, that's not right. Let's refresh this because I didn't get my latest snapshot in here yet. I didn't refresh. Let's give this thing a minute to recapture all of that data. And we're going to refilter this real quick to the snapshot that I just took. Yep, there it is, 9:08 p.m. here in Minnesota. And so with this report, I can see now exactly what my file size is, how many work sets I've got, total groups, instances of those groups themselves, links, imports, right? All kinds of information. How many project parameters have been defined in this project, and how many of those are, well, in this case, not unused, but invisible? How many component families do I have, and how many of those component families are able to be purged? In my case, 54% of my component families, my loadable component families, are purgeable. My component family types, there's actually 1,400 component family types that could be purged. 89% of my types. That's a lot of space in my project. I have a lot of room to actually decrease my file size if I needed to. System families, I've got 64 system families completely unused, 42%. I've got 5 text types. They're all in use someplace. Dimension types, 2 of them, all of them in use. That's fantastic. In fact, I can tell you exactly how many instances of text and dimensions I've got. I can give just a quick overview of everything in my project. This particular snapshot, by the way, took 434 seconds, which I have no idea exactly how long that is because I'm not a maths major, so I don't do that kind of stuff in my head. What is this? 434 divided by 60 is 7 minutes. Took about 7 minutes to actually capture this, and took it about a minute, just under a minute, to actually process it and get it into my database. So all told, about 8 minutes, probably because I'm running all kinds of other stuff in the background and doing a presentation. Usually this takes a little bit less time. If I go to this previous snapshot here, previous one was about 4 minutes, right? So it depends on how much loads on the computer itself. But this gives me that information in a matter of minutes. I'm able to actually understand stuff. So let's kind of dig through my project a bit. Let's kind of see what dirty secrets Sean has in his project model. I'm actually curious about those project parameters that are not visible. Somebody defined a project parameter, and to do that, it has to be a shared parameter if it's going to be invisible. And I kind of want to know what they are. Well, there's some parameters here that came from maybe some previous add-ins. Maybe I want to strip those out. I've got tools to help me find them and strip them, but I need to know what they are first because they're invisible, right? I can see what they're associated to, exactly the category name. I could potentially understand then, maybe make a schedule and know what the data is that's stored inside of them. Maybe I want to keep that data and put it someplace else in a non-invisible parameter. Now, maybe I want to know like all of the project parameters associated to doors. I can isolate that real quickly. I can see every single parameter that's associated to doors. I can see if it's shared or not, if it's an instance parameter or not, if it's visible or not, and again, the category name. Now, in my case, I'm not pulling the values for them in this particular report. You could if you wanted to, but I just wanted to understand like what the parameters were. Why are they even project parameters in the first place? I'm not a big fan personally of project parameters. You may be, your choice, of course, but you can understand more about that health. Maybe I care about the work sets that exist in my project. I want to know all about the work sets. Right? I can see exactly how many elements are on which work sets inside of here. I can see what categories of objects they happen to be. Maybe I care like what's on the interior work set specifically, and I can kind of look through and see kind of what's on the import or link. There's an import or a link. It's a CAD file or a Revit model that's on the interior work set. Like maybe I want to know what that is. Maybe I'm going to go investigate the imports and links area over here a bit more, right? But I can understand more about exactly what's where in my model just from a data point of view. Makes it really easy. Maybe I want to investigate the links, right? Raster Images directly imported in my model. I want to find out more about this. Okay, it's an imported file, says imported. That's how Revit tracks it. It's a raster image. But one thing I always look for is the work set name that it's on, the view that it's in. I like knowing what that is. It's called image 12 3D ISO Southwest whatever, right? Some random camera view. And the image name is identical to that. That's typically an indication to me that somebody saved the rendering, a rendering directly to the project. And what Revit does is it actually has to keep that image, however big it is, zipped up in the Revit project model. And then every time you open up your model, it has to unzip it, put it in a temp directory, and then import that image into the model for use. It's fairly heavy on the models. I don't like seeing this. So usually what I'll do is I'll go clean those images up and talk with the team members about best practices, right? Well, maybe I'm curious about those links and where they might be, right? So I can look at this, like the work set name, interior here. There's a Revit model linked. The architectural site Revit model is linked to the interior work set. Somebody really wasn't being very careful. There's an imported symbol that's actually an import. It's a DWG in this case. That's on the interior work set, means it's imported, not current view only. And it was an import, right? But I can discover that stuff real quick. And I can also scroll over here to the right and figure out who it was that generated those things. What were they? Who was the original author of this? In this case, it was me. I actually went through and imported a bunch of things so I could have some examples for you guys. I could, if I wanted to, find out exactly when that was, because Revit stores that information. You can unlock the database of the Revit model and understand all of this info real simply. Maybe you want to dig through and understand the warnings. Maybe there's certain high intensity warnings that you really care about and you want to isolate those. You could filter for those and you could get exact lists of elements in your model, element IDs, know exactly what level they're on, what work set, what they are, and what the actual warning is that affects them, right? I can isolate that in a matter of seconds, real easy. I like also investigating through component families and seeing what's been loaded and how many instances there are. And I like to kind of look through this stuff real quick, just my own, personal choice of how to investigate this. System families, in-place families, the construction methodologies of elements you can actually investigate through and see if the construction types and materials at play follow your standards. If you want to get real creative with writing some of that information, so I can go, hey, walls, there's a brick wall up here, and I can see all the different components and layers and what the actual thicknesses are of the parts and pieces. And I could compare that because I have the data of maybe my template snapshot or my warehouse file. If I got real clever, I could compare the two together in the single snapshot and have it report back to me things in the model that are maybe not standard, that I need to make standard. I know that there's tools that watch for does something break standard when it happens, but after it's happened, or maybe I get models from outside sources and I want to see just how out of standard it is, I need a way to discover that. And this, in a lot of cases, can help me figure that kind of information out. Right, I can also understand here text types, where they're used, what views they're in. Dimension types, same thing. This is one that I like to understand, dimension segments. I specifically always filter for those that have been overridden. Now I'm using feet and inches in my case, using an imperial measurement system here, but I like to understand exactly when the actual value of dimensions have been overridden with something else. Now, if there's things like C so-and-so, I could care less. Doesn't matter if it's C mechanical, C structural, whatever, those are fine. But when I'm seeing things like X value here overridden with some other dimension string, either with like the dot, super dirty methodology here, or I don't know, maybe there's just a period, right? And then that probably indicates someone's putting text over the top of this. I care about things like that. Maybe they're using some invisible characters here to override and make it look real, like a dimension. I like to know about these things. And then I can go and have conversations with my team members and be like, guys, this isn't the right way. Let's clean this up because this is actually dangerous BIM here. I like to know where lines are in my project model, exactly what views they happen to be in, right? And I can isolate that and understand exactly what view, exactly how many of those lines are in that view. If I'm seeing things breaking my standards, I like to know that kind of stuff. And this helps me discover that real quick. Seeing view breakdowns, material breakdowns, you name it. Like if you can dream it up, if you've got questions about your Revit project models, and you're like, hey, I want to know X about X, right? You can probably get that information out of the model and start to write a report around that kind of question and really understand more about the data in your project. And because you've got access to all of the information using Revit over here and this project snapshot exporter, you do not have to, basically be limited by somebody else's explicit data extraction for their health check. You can go in here and go after any parameter values you want and check against any comparison of standards to your models that you want. And also, because this goes out to Microsoft SQL, that's kind of a pretty common language to speak. The structured query language is known by many, and many of those outside data sets use that to some degree. And that means you can actually convert Revit now to any format you'd like, write a query, and pull that data out. It's actually pretty easy once you understand a bit about the SQL side. Okay. So super powerful tool set here. That's the goal, is to help you understand that you have access to all of the data that surrounds your Revit project model, as far as its performance, how fast it opens and saves, where people are spending their time, and all of the information within your project model by using the snapshot exporter. Those two tools together can unlock all of that information real fast. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how you get your hands on this tool set. How can you get it? So let me actually switch over here to how to obtain this. Our partner there in Australia is APAL. And if you want to know more about this suite, you can go to their homepage, apal.com.au, go to products, go to CTC software. On the CTC software portion of the page, you can get here to the CTC BIM Data Suite. And from there, you can get more information from the APAL team themselves. In fact, it's probably going to be best to just contact them here through the page. Most of our suites, if you were to go to Hive or Project Suite, Manager Batch, whatever, there's usually going to be a trial download here. The BIM Data Suite is a bit more involved. And so we want to have conversations with you before you actually get a trial. We're more than willing to give you a trial, but we want to make sure we have a conversation first so you understand what that trial means. It's not like most add-ins where you just install an add-in and it magically works. There's a lot of working parts in the mix. SQL Server has to be there. There's some services on a server in your firm, and then all of the Revit workstations themselves have to have the PAL tool, and a few of the workstations, like your BIM managers, probably will want to have the snapshot tool. And so there's a lot of parts and pieces, but once that's set up, after a morning of installs, and you're all set up and ready to go, this suite gives you so much data passively, hands off. So go take a look at APAL's site, get a hold of them about the BIM Data Suite, and see what it's going to take for your company to be able to start leveraging this. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about questions. If you have any questions, feel free to start typing them in. I'm always interested to see what questions you may want to ask, especially about the BIM Data Suite. If you don't have any questions and you're about to close out of the webinar, I also want to say thank you. Thank you for the time that you've given us today. We always appreciate when you show up live and interact with us if you do have questions or have the opportunity to ask questions. But if you can't stick around for the Q&A session, we thank you for the time that you've given us. If you do have time to stick around for Q&A, I'm going to hang out here for a few minutes, and as soon as questions start rolling through, I'll answer them live and try to show you directly inside the application, when relevant, the answers to those questions. Keeping an eye there on the questions window. Also, one other note, next week at this same time, noon on Wednesday, we're going to be talking about one of our other suites, which is Hive. And Hive also has some of these powers, some of these controls, the project activity portion specifically, and it takes a little bit less setup. So you might be interested in showing up for that one as well if you want to see a little bit more about the Hive project activity logging, where you don't have to set up a SQL Server. Though, to be clear, it does actually give you a little bit less power because you can't right now write your own reports and integrate it with your own internal systems. Some people like that power and they want to keep that data on their own network, and so the BIM Data Suite, for many, is a really powerful tool when you want to keep that data internal to your company. Some companies aren't structured well enough or aren't large enough to have an IT presence to be able to actually set up that infrastructure and bear the expense. So in those cases, the Hive project activity logger might be a better solution for you. But it is an option, and you'll know more about that next week if you show up for that webinar. I'm not seeing any questions roll in right now, so once again, I want to say thank you all for the time that you've spent. We do look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Have a fantastic day.